Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the virtual college fair. We are going to wait just a couple of seconds here, let all the students finish funneling into the room, and we will be right back. Okay, well, good evening, everyone. I think we will go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us tonight for the Colorado Virtual College Fair. Some of you have been to sessions already. Some of you are joining for the first time, so we're excited that you're here. We have a great panel for you to learn all about all things exchange. So a few housekeeping things before we get started. The best way for you to engage with our speakers tonight is through the Q&A button that's on your screen. They will be answering questions throughout the presentation as well as at the end, but that's the best way to submit those to them. They'll either reply or talk about your question on video. If they don't get to all of the questions by the end of the presentation, those sessions or all of your information and your questions will be shared with our presenters as well, so they will be able to answer those. Your camera and microphones are off, so we can't see you, we can't hear you. Don't worry about that. Hopefully you can see and hear us okay. If not, just send a message in that Q&A section and we'll keep an eye on that. And then don't forget, this is just one of many different sessions that are happening this week. So be sure to check out that session list, sign up for other sessions that you might be interested in, and then check back within about a week of all of the sessions being over, and all of the session recordings will be available for you to view after that as well. So again, we're excited that you're here, and I'm going to turn it over to our panel and they will get you started.
Hi, everyone. We really appreciate you joining us. Thank you so very much. We have a lot to go over tonight, so we will get rocking and rolling. But I'd like to introduce myself first, and then my colleagues can introduce themselves. My name is Adrienne Loveland. I am the Assistant Director of Admission for the University of Wyoming in Laramie, Wyoming.
Yeah, I guess I'll go next, Heather. Hi, everyone. My name is Anders Groseth. I'm our Associate Director for Recruitment at Montana State University in Bozeman, Montana. Thanks for being here.
Hi, everyone. My name is Heather Wilford. I'm the Senior Assistant Director of Admissions with Oregon State. You might have guessed by the giant beaver flag behind me. Thanks for being here today.
So just to kind of get us started with this, we are going to kind of talk a little bit about why you should go out of state, and then we're going to dive into the WUE. So going out of state, you wouldn't be here if you weren't thinking about it. So we're thrilled to hear that you're considering out of state options. The couple of big reasons that stand out when you're starting your college search and why you should look out of state. Definitely when you're thinking about it, they could be less impacted majors, meaning there might be some with wait lists or some that you might not get into right away your junior year. So kind of looking outside these four walls, there might be schools that maybe just implemented a program or they have more seats available. Also specialized programs. I mean, something that rings true right away is marine biology. We're a really landlocked state here in Colorado. So being somewhere close to the water to actually study that marine life is kind of a bonus. Also, there might be a school with a really specialized program you're thinking about. A roommate wanted to do PGA turf management, and there are not a lot of schools that do that. So you kind of had to look outside and kind of explore different options for such a specific major. Also, and we're going to talk more about this, but the affordability. So many out-of-state schools know that that's a barrier. So what are they going to do about it? They're going to offer scholarships. They're going to participate in the WUE. Anything to kind of help you look again out of state and know that it can be a viable option. Internships with different companies. You know, if you think you want to work for a Fortune 500, maybe Ohio, there's a whole bunch condensed in one little area. Or maybe it's been your dream to work for Coca-Cola. Well, Atlanta's your city. So if you have a place or a dream or a hope of a company you've always wanted to work for, there are places that you can do that. Also, kind of just exploring your options. Maybe you want different culture. Thinking of the South, who doesn't love a good crawfish boil? Or, you know, if you want to go, you've always lived in the mountainous areas, but now you're ready for a hot Hawaii or something like that. It's just something different to experience and kind of enhance your life a little bit. You may find something you love or maybe something you really miss. And that independent piece is huge. If you wanted the same thing, you could do that. Colorado will always be here. Your family will be here. So going out really does show employers too that you are ready to take a risk, you take a chance on yourself, and you're ready to explore things and that you're mature and ready to do those types of things. So there's a lot of really great reasons to look at a state. And again, we're really excited you're thinking about this. And we'll go on to talking a little more about that.
Okay, everybody. As Adrian just said, we're really glad to have you here, and we're so glad that you're doing some further research on some of these different programs that can help make going to school affordable at different parts of the country. And I think that this is a great slide because there's a lot of buzzwords that can go along with the Western Undergraduate Exchange program. I've been working in higher ed for about 12 years now, and I still feel like every single year I learn something new about WUE as well. And so some things that you can definitely be mindful of, things like reciprocity. Reciprocity, for those of you who aren't familiar, would be states who have a relationship and an agreement so that a student from one state can get in-state tuition at a different state. This is kind of handled differently across the country, but this is always a buzzword that seems to come up when you're talking about the Western Undergraduate Exchange program. Residency. We're going to talk a little bit more about residency later in this presentation as well, but how does WUE affect a student's residency being an in-state versus an out-of-state student? Things like scholarship retention and then renewable scholarships a little bit down that list. How do you keep a scholarship once you have it? How can you make sure that this is something that can continue to benefit you, not just in your first year on a campus, but all the way throughout your college career? Schools that are more moving towards the test optional or test blind region, obviously with the current circumstances across the country with the health crisis, there's a lot of you who haven't been able to take a test. And so there's a lot of schools that are taking that into account as well when they're looking at scholarship considerations. A super score method, for those of you who aren't familiar, a super score method is when a student can take a test, should you be able to do so, multiple times and sort of create a hybrid score using the highest scores from different sections on different tests. Some schools do that and some schools don't. So that's something that you'll always want to keep in mind and always ask those questions when you're either visiting a school or speaking with a representative. And then major restrictions. This is another big thing, not just with the Western Undergraduate Exchange program, but some scholarships at schools specifically, you can only have if you're in certain majors. And if you're in different majors, sometimes those scholarships aren't available to you regarding what you're studying. So again, just good questions to ask, good things to have on a notebook when you're going to visit a school or you're speaking with somebody, just so that they can give you the best information possible. On that other side of the screen right now, FAFSA, financial aid. The FAFSA application, which is the free application for federal student aid, this for a lot of students will end up qualifying them for grants, which you don't have to pay back, loans, which you will, and then work study opportunities, student employment opportunities that can help you pay for school in the long run. One thing I always like to mention with FAFSA is that it is the free application for federal student aid. And so if you ever find yourself on a site that's asking you for credit card information or any sort of pay information to fill out the application, you're on the wrong site. And one of our future slides will actually fill you in on the proper site to go to. So. Now, starting your college search. Now, some of you I know at this point in the game are really far along in this college search. You've visited campuses, you've talked with representatives at a college fair or when they've come to visit your school, whether in person or virtually. But a lot of students are just starting that process as well. There's a lot that you can take into consideration when you're trying to make the college decision that's best for you. You want to start with academics, obviously. Does this school have the academic program that I'm most interested in? Does this school have a scholarship or an academic support system that's going to support me all the way through graduation? As Adrian was mentioning earlier, you also want to take into account things like location and size. Where do I want to be? What sort of atmosphere and setting do I want to find myself in on my campus each and every day? As you get more and more into the details of things, you can take into account things like student to faculty ratio, how many percentage of classes are led by professors versus teachers' assistants or graduate students or anything else along those lines. What are the student life opportunities? How are you going to get engaged with these opportunities through clubs and organizations, athletics, and residence life? You definitely, whenever possible, we encourage students to visit a campus, whether it's through a virtual setting like this, or if you do have the opportunity to go and put your feet on a campus, that's a phenomenal way to get familiar with a place. What are their application processes, both for admission and for scholarship programs? What are the overall costs? Is it something that you can afford? And what scholarship programs can help you make that happen? And then scholarships, the Western Undergraduate Exchange program, academic scholarships, and other opportunities along those lines.
Great. So I want to talk a little bit about now jumping into the Western Undergraduate Exchange, which you're all here for, also called WUE. So if you hear someone saying WUE, that's what we're talking about, is the Western Undergraduate Exchange, and some other important information regarding out-of-state scholarships, things for you to consider, think about, and know as you're doing your college search. So first, with WUE, there's a lot of things to really be keeping in mind. Like Anders mentioned, there's a lot of buzzwords, a lot of things that you're going to be hearing around WUE. So we wanted to clarify with you up front what WUE is and what WUE is not. So WUE is one of the programs as part of the Western Interstate Commission of Higher Education, also known as WICHE. They have a couple of different programs and a lot of great data and information about higher education, and WUE is one of the programs that falls under its umbrella. WUE is 150% of in-state tuition. So it's not reciprocity, one of the words you learned earlier, where it's directly giving you in-state tuition. It's giving you 150% of in-state tuition. So it's a way to make out-of-state tuition much more affordable through one scholarship type program. It is something that's specific to public post-secondary education institutions. So something that you're going to find only at your public schools within the Western states. And you'll see a map soon of what territories and what regions qualify under WUE in terms of their state and location. And it is something that's available for both 2-year and 4-year programs. So there are some community colleges that might offer WUE, but a lot of what you're going to see is it available at 4-year public institutions. So at a base, WUE is pretty set and standard. You know, it has a very strict boundary for what WUE is, what WUE is not, and how students access WUE is something that gets a little bit more confusing for people. And so that's why we want to make sure to go through that with you really specifically. So like I mentioned, WUE is not in-state tuition. It's not the same as reciprocity. So that's something that you'll want to make sure that you're aware of as you're looking at the different costs and thinking about what you can afford going out of state. WUE is also not guaranteed. This is something that we talk about with a lot of students. Just because you're from a Western state doesn't guarantee you WUE at every institution that you're looking at throughout the Western half of the US. Every school is going to handle it differently, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of the things you should be considering later in the presentation. It's also not automatic, so some schools will handle it through different parts of their application, through different requirements. So again, still kind of along the lines of not guaranteed, not automatic. At some institutions, WUE is not available for every major. So you heard Anders say major restrictions. So some institutions have certain programs that are only eligible for the major program, for the WUE program within their major. Some are open to any major that you're looking at. And even if you change majors, it wouldn't impact your ability to obtain WUE or to keep WUE through your 4 years. Residency, again, just to clarify, with it's kind of similar to reciprocity, like Anders mentioned. Residency is how a state might determine your in-state or if you're out of state, and that varies by state, and it's not necessarily something the university controls. It's by the state requirements to change your actual legal residency within the state. So getting WUE does not change your residency within a state, only changes what you're considered for in terms of your tuition or the discount on tuition. So if you were coming from, you know, Colorado to a school in Montana and you got WUE, you're still considered an out-of-state student, but you're paying WUE level tuition. So it's not going to change your actual residency. It's also not eligible at every school within the Western US. So schools get to choose whether or not they're going to participate in the WUE program. So just because a university is located within a WUE eligible state doesn't mean that they're going to offer it to you or even have it available. So it depends on each school in each state how they're going to award WUE, who they're awarding it to, and whether they're participating or not. We also just like to clarify that private schools are not part of the WUE program. It is a public institution.
So just to kind of give you an idea, you know, we are throwing around some acronyms and hopefully this is making some sense, but we also want to show you who is a part of WUE. Now, what WUE does is if you're from a particular state, you're eligible for it in another WUE state. So like Heather was saying, if you're from Colorado and you're looking at a school in Montana, it's okay. But if you're from Colorado and looking at a school from Ohio, that's not going to work. It all has to happen here in the Western United States. Now, again, reiterating what Heather said is that not every school in every one of these states participates. So you really want to do your research and your due diligence when you're looking at the institution, how the WUE process works, if it even exists at that school. So these are the 15 states in Guam and the Northern Mariana Islands that participate in it, and this is it. You may hear some states that are not colored in blue here that say, oh yeah, we have WUE. They do not. They may have a program similar to WUE, but they cannot classify them as themselves as a WUE state. This is it. So just to kind of clarify that, that seems to be a myth out there that any state can offer that and they cannot. So just be careful with that because the rules that govern WUE only apply to these states. So again, a really good piece of the research to be doing. So just to kind of break it down, we're visual, so we assume everybody is, and it kind of helps to have an actual example of how WUE works. So how WUE is going to work, it's 150% of that state's in-state tuition. So you have your in-state times 1.5, and that will give you the WUE rate. So an actual numbered example, sorry, Heather, next slide. Sorry. If the in-state tuition is $12,000, you times that by 1.5, and you're gonna get a WUE rate of $18,000. So that is what you would pay for tuition at that institution. Now, that can be a significant decrease from an out-of-state tuition. So there really is a cost savings benefit for participating in the WUE. But you again want to ask those questions. Do you participate? And what do the numbers look like? But it will always be 1.5 times their in-state tuition, or in-state plus another half, if that helps you do the math, whichever's easiest.
Okay, when it comes to applying for WUE, this is going to be a different process for the different schools that you're going to end up looking at. Many of the WICHE partner institutions use WUE as a merit-based scholarship. So Heather was saying earlier, it's not automatic everywhere, it's not guaranteed everywhere, and sometimes there is a process to go through in order to apply and end up qualifying for the Western Undergraduate Exchange program. When you're applying for a school or for the program specifically, there's always a few things that we hope students will keep in consideration. The deadlines. Are the schools that you're looking at, do they use the WUE program and award it on a first come first serve basis? Is it a restricted major program like we were talking about earlier? And what are the deadlines that you need to be mindful of if there is an application process for that scholarship specifically? That's the application process, that next bullet point down. Again, some schools will do this based off of academic information, be it your GPA, a combination of GPA and test scores or so forth. But then some schools will have it so that there is actually a full separate application that is reviewed in order to award a WUE spot. minimum GPAs and SAT or ACT test scores. A lot of times those are how schools will end up gauging which students are going to be awarded a WUE spot or other merit-based scholarships as well. And then restrictions on eligible majors. And these are just things that are good to keep in the back of your mind. And with admissions professionals like the three of us, this is what we're here for. And so if you ask us these questions, this is actually what we really like guiding the process with. Actually, at the school that I work for, we used to have restricted majors with WUE, and that's not the case anymore. And so always be in tune with that, because sometimes these circumstances can change just from one year to the next. Now, at Montana State University, my institution, interestingly, we are actually still in the process of finalizing our scholarship parameters for the fall of 2021. But what I've put up here is sort of a rough estimate of what we've done with the Western Undergraduate Exchange program in recent years. If anyone's interested in looking at our scholarship programs, I've posted our website right at the top of the screen there, and you can go and check out all of the different scholarship programs at that link. But when we've assessed WUE or Western Undergraduate Exchange programs in recent years, what we have done is a full separate application. A student has filled out this application that kind of fills us in on their academic merits with that review of the admissions application, and then other attributes and factors that play into you as a student. Did you do sports? Were you in music? Did you have a job outside of school? Were you involved in the school DECA program? Those things that really create not just an academic student, but a community member for our campus. Students who end up applying for the Western Undergrad program but don't end up receiving one of our spots because it is a competitive program at Montana State University, you're still fully in the running for our other merit-based scholarship programs, which are called the Achievement Awards. And these are academically related scholarship programs. At Montana State University, we also have a resource called CAT scholarships, and this is something that students can have access to once they're admitted into the university. And CAT scholarships is a sort of a in-house scholarship web or warehouse that you can find out about all of the different scholarship programs that a student can qualify for through Montana State University specifically. So if it's a special interest scholarship, something from our Leadership Institute, if you're a student going into our College of Nursing or Engineering, those colleges will offer specific scholarships. And so students can start to gauge about how much scholarship money they can end up getting their hands on before they even set foot on campus. Now, when it comes to our deadlines, our admissions deadline and our Western Undergraduate Exchange program deadline are rolling. And that means that we just don't have firm deadlines that you need to submit information by a specific date. I did put down there, it's always better to do that stuff sooner rather than later, just so it's off of your list of things to do. But with how MSU works with both scholarships and our application process, there's no deadline or last date that you could submit that information. And I just did want to mention again, we are still in the process of finalizing our scholarship parameters, and we're going to have all that stuff up on that website just as soon as we can.
Great. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Oregon State's policy and what we can offer in terms of scholarships. So for us, WUE is back. So some of you might have been familiar with Oregon State in the past. We didn't have it for a really long time, and when we used to have it, it was only available to students who were poultry science students. So very restricted back in the day. So we took a little break, now we're back. And WUE for us is a holistic review process. So when students apply for admission, if they're from one of the WUE eligible states, we will automatically consider them for the scholarship based off of their admissions application. So there's no separate application to be considered for WUE, but it is competitive. So not all students who are from a Western state are going to be awarded the scholarship for WUE, but similar to what Andrews was saying for Montana State, if a student who doesn't get WUE will still get considered for other scholarships for non-resident students. So just because you didn't get WUE at Oregon State doesn't mean you're cut out of all other scholarship opportunities. We're gonna look at that first, and then if you don't receive WUE, we'll look at you for other scholarships based off of your admissions application. We also have an additional scholarship application students can use once they're admitted to OSU called Scholar Dollars. It's one application that rules them all, so a little Lord of the Rings reference for you all. The one app will put you out there for all the additional scholarships that Oregon State has to offer. That includes academic department scholarships, scholarships from alumni donors, and much more. And it offers an external scholarship search tool. So If you've been looking for scholarships, probably the hardest thing is really finding where you even go to apply for scholarships. So that scholarship search tool is just a way to help you kind of along that process and finding other awards you can apply to that aren't necessarily specific to Oregon State. Our priority deadline is February 1st. We may still be awarding scholarships after February 1st, but in order to receive the most money possible and make sure you're not missing anything, we want to make sure that you get your admissions application and your Scholar Dollars application in by February 1st to get the most money possible. And our scholarship link is there at the bottom, scholarships.oregonstate.edu, a lot of great information. So the big takeaway for OSU is, one, we're back, we're with WUE. It's a holistic review and it's competitive. And also I forgot to mention it, but it's not restricted to majors. So any major at OSU can be considered for the WUE scholarship starting in fall 2021 and beyond. And I want to say before Adrian gets on here, we had a little technical difficulty when this was starting and their slide did not upload. So I'll just pass it on to you, Adrian, if you want to talk a little bit about Wyoming, but your slide doesn't show up. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. And actually, Heather, is it okay if I share my screen? Okay. Okay. The reason I needed to share my screen is you will see we do a graph approach. And so this was going to be me trying to explain my hands, and I thought that sounded awful. So thank you, Heather, for helping me out. But at the University of Wyoming, what we do is we're very transparent with you on how you're going to get WUE or our Brown and Gold scholarship. So depending on your unweighted GPA, your best ACT or SAT score, where the two numbers coincide on this graph, we will guarantee you $2,000, $4,000, or $7,000 in Brown and Gold commitment. Or if you're in that top gold bracket, that is how you're going to get WUE for us. You can see that we do require a test score for it. So we understand this year is a very interesting year with testing sites and getting a spot. So we are test optional for admission, but for scholarships, we do need that test score. We will accept test scores until May 1st. And if you do have a situation that is not conducive to getting a test site, we are going to review those on a case-by-case basis. So please know we're willing to work with you, but this is how you would receive WUE or our Brown and Gold commitment at the University of Wyoming. Your application for admission is your scholarship application. So once you fill that out and you submit it, we take your information and automatically put you in the running for this scholarship. So you don't need to worry about doing anything else. It doesn't matter your major. We have no major restrictions. And we are going to make sure that, again, we'll wait for those test scores and we're willing to work with you until May 1st. So we are pretty laid back about it, but also up on the top is our scholarship website. If you have questions, and you can always reach out to the admissions office if you're one of those with a unique situation. We're happy to help in any way we can.
Okay, so scholarships and financial aid. We've been talking about the Western Undergraduate Exchange program primarily, but there's also different award opportunities that students can end up really benefiting from throughout their college careers. I mentioned earlier academic scholarships. We've also kind of talked about different academic scholarships that are going to be different per institution, but with different academic awards, like at Montana State University, that Achievement Award program that I mentioned, these are academically related merit-based scholarships that you end up qualifying for based on your application for admission. Beyond that, you're going to find that there's different scholarships at different levels. So again, if you're going into the College of Nursing or Engineering or Business or whatever the case may be, then you're going to end up having scholarships available to you based on your area of study. And so for different schools, this is again a good question to always ask is, are things stackable? Can I work these two opportunities together? And that's going to be just different for each different institution. So I don't want to give anyone too specific of information. Private scholarships. Private scholarships can come through your community's local Rotary program or the Lions Club program, a business in town that's giving out a graduating senior scholarship. we cannot stress enough that it might seem like a drop in the bucket, but that's a drop closer to you are paying for your academic career. And so if it's a $500 scholarship that ends up covering books, well, then that covers your books for a semester. That's a massive step in the right direction. Those scholarship search engines, Heather, I don't know if you noticed, but I really like that your scholarship program is an external search as well. I think that's a cool feature. Ours doesn't have that. But there are different scholarship search engines out there like FastWeb. There's just several different out there that you can end up qualifying for different awards that might seem a little bit off the wall. One of the ones that we always talk about in my office is that we know a student who qualified for the Tall Gentlemen's Club scholarship. So for any of you who are 6'3" or taller, look out for that one. But then state and local scholarships. State and local scholarships are going to be per state specific, obviously, but then they're just different award programs that can incentivize possibly keeping you in state, or they can support you going out of state as well. And then last but not least, that financial aid, the FAFSA program. I did mention that we were going to mention that scholarship, or that, I'm sorry, that website earlier, fafsa.ed.gov. That is the official FAFSA website where you can find that application for free. It opens on October 1st each year, so it's coming up just around the corner. And then priority deadlines or just standard deadlines to submit your FAFSA application are going to be different for each different school that you look at. Now, is WUE stackable? I was sort of just talking about this, and it depends. And the reason that I say it depends is because if you take my institution, for instance, and Heather and Adrian might have different information on this as well, but at my school, the WUE program is not stackable with the academic scholarships, those achievement award programs that I mentioned. We're going to give a student what's most financially beneficial for them. So you wouldn't get an achievement award and WUE. However, you might get the Western Undergraduate Exchange program and a scholarship because you're studying in the math department or the psychology department in the College of Letters and Sciences. So it sort of depends on what you mean by stackable, and again, what institution you're looking at and what their rules and regulations are for building a scholarship program to be as large as it can be for a student.
Great. So next question, do I need to apply for WUE? And it depends. So as you're hearing, every school is a little different in how they award the scholarship, and you know, the parameters around the scholarship. I think there's been a couple of questions in the chat of people wanting to know how they identify themselves as being interested in the WUE program. And for schools that have the application for WUE, you know, that's obviously the way that you would do it. But for schools like Oregon State, we don't have a separate application for WUE, but we are just taking anyone who is from a WUE eligible state and considering them for WUE, right? We're not having you say, I'm interested, a lot of money as a scholarship sounds great, right? You don't have to self-identify or raise your hand saying that you want that. We would just see, okay, they're applying from Colorado. Colorado is a WUE eligible state. We will automatically consider them for that scholarship because of where their residency is and that they're applying to Oregon State. We would consider you and then decide whether or not you're getting WUE at that point. So if you need to apply for WUE or not, depends on the institution. It's a great question to write down on your list as you talk with admissions representatives. Can I use WUE for a graduate program? Again, it depends. So some schools offer a similar program for graduate students, but WUE, what we're talking about, we're focusing on undergraduate programs and admission and scholarships. There are some programs that are going to be similar at the graduate level, but this scholarship for WUE that you get as you apply for your bachelor's degree is specific to earning that bachelor's degree for that 4-year program. And you can't take it with you to a graduate school just because you had it in undergraduate. Depends on if that school, if they're participating in a program and what their requirements are.
And what are the requirements for WUE? As you heard when all three of us were talking about our program, you could see that all three of us are looking for different things. So every school is going to be different. So it depends. And I think we keep saying that so that you know that we are participants, but it varies amongst the schools. So it's really important for you to ask the right questions and do some research because you don't want to miss out. We're pretty transparent with it. You saw the three of us go through what we're looking for. So we will talk to you about it. We will help you. That is our job. And we want to make sure that we help you get free money to go to our institution. But you definitely want to ask. Those vary amongst the schools. And is WUE renewable? So with the WUE program under WICHE, it is good for 4 years. Now, some institutions may have a GPA that you need to maintain. Some schools, if it is specific to a major, you can't change majors and keep WUE. And it is also not good for summer classes. So it is usually going to be for your academic year, a fall and spring semester for 4 years. After that, it goes away. So it is kind of motivation to go to class and keep your grades up and get done in that 4 years, because there is a time limit. There's an expiration date on it. So again, you want to ask your institution that you're applying to what their restrictions are and how that is going to be applicable to you and what your goals are.
Okay, so you've heard us talk several times throughout the evening about residency. Again, residency is when you would switch your residency from being a Colorado state resident to a resident in the state of Wyoming or Oregon or Montana or California or anywhere else across the country. Now, if you end up getting the WUE program, the question is, does it change my residency? And it doesn't just depend. No, it does not. Generally speaking, residency is a process that a student must go to check specific boxes over the course of a specific period of time. In the state of Montana, it's a year. Other places, it's a little bit shorter. But you have to go through specific processes to become a resident of whichever state you end up enrolling in school. Now, for some schools, you can end up having merit-based scholarships when you're establishing residency, and for other schools or states, you can't. And so again, we keep building this list of just good questions to keep in mind and ask, but it does not switch your residency or your state of residency. And depending on if you do want to switch your state of residency, that might impact your eligibility for the Western Undergrad program or other academic scholarships. Now, for more information on this program, you've heard us mention several times throughout the evening the Western Interstate Commission of Higher Education, or WICHE. WICHE is kind of a governing body or an overseer of the WUE program. And so we've put their website up there on the screen so that you can go and find some further information. I saw some of the questions in the chat about what's the 150% based off of and who kind of regulates the program. This is going to be the best website for you to find all of that kind of just general information in one spot.
Great. So right now we're going to go through the questions that have been waiting for us in the Q&A box and answer some of those live. But we want to make sure that you have our email information. So if you have specific questions, you can always reach out to us for some clarification, whether it's about WUE and the information we went over tonight or specific to our universities. So feel free to take a picture of that slide, write it down. I don't think any of us plan on getting fired anytime soon, so we will be here to answer your questions after tonight's presentation. So with that, I think we'll jump in and start answering some of these questions. So we talked a little bit about the first one. Please let us know how you can signify on the application that you're applying under WUE. So again, that's going to be dependent on the school and how they select WUE. So another question, Adrian, if you want to grab this one, if I get WUE my freshman year, do I have to reapply every year?
Yeah, and that's a great question. There are some schools that you do have to reapply every year. There are some that you may have to apply every semester. The admissions office will be very transparent with you because our worst nightmare is you losing that. So between financial aid and the admissions office, they will tell you if you need to reapply or if it's just automatic and what you need to do to maintain that WUE status. So again, another good question to ask the representative from the institution that you're looking at.
Anders, we have a question specific to MSU. They had heard that business majors cannot receive WUE. Has that changed? Can you clarify MSU's policy for major restrictions?
Certainly, yeah, and thank you for writing that in, and thank you, Heather, for throwing it my way. Business students can receive the Western Undergraduate Exchange program at Montana State University. As I was mentioning, several years ago, we used to have a couple of the program that were restricted majors, mainly in our College of Arts and Architecture. But anyway, yes, College of Business students can qualify for the Western Undergrad program and all of those other merit-based scholarships as well.
One of the questions that came up was, I was wondering if you do not live in one of the states that offers WUE, can you still get WUE when you apply to colleges that offer and get it? So I think it's good to clarify, you might remember the map that we showed earlier in the presentation. You have to be a resident of a WUE state and then attend a school in another WUE state. So you can't be from Texas and get WUE somewhere, and you couldn't go from Colorado to Texas and get WUE. So you have to go from one WUE state to another WUE state for it to be available to you. If you move and change your residency, so if you started off in Colorado and you move, while you're in college, your family moves to Massachusetts or something, that's where you're spending your summers, you're gonna wanna check with your institution to see how it might impact your renewability for it. Some may not change it based on the fact that you already had it. Some may change it because you've changed and you're no longer from a WUE state. So it depends on the institution. Get to check with them to clarify for that. So hopefully that answered that question. For Adrian, could you answer, what is the 150% in-state tuition based on? The cost of tuition in a Colorado State school or a private school or an average?
Great question. So that 150% is based off of the institution that you're applying to, their in-state tuition rate. So for example, I'm just making up numbers for simple math. If you are looking at University of Idaho and their in-state tuition is $10,000, you will take 1.5 times that 10,000 and get 15,000 that will be your WUE rate. So it will always be the rate of the school you're applying to in-state number.
Great question. Next one, Anders, if you want to grab this one, if your GPA goes below the required number, do you lose your WUE instantly, or do you have a select amount of time to recover it? Does that depend on the school?
It does depend on the school. And so this is one thing that once you enroll, let's paint a perfect picture. Let's hope that none of you will ever run into this. I know you're all fabulous students out there and this wouldn't be the case. But there are students who have tough semesters. They have a tough transition to their freshman year. And so at different schools, there's different appeals processes. And so you can end up doing an appeal at some institutions where you have a specific amount of time where you can raise your GPA back up to the qualifying figure of what that school is. And then you can keep that scholarship even if you've spent a brief amount of time dipping below the required GPA to keep it. So.
And there's, I know, a question specific to Oregon State, and said they saw on the WUE website that the tuition for a WUE participant was a certain amount, but they did the math really quick today and that doesn't match up with what it would be for Oregon State based off our in-state tuition. So a lot of places you're gonna see a WUE student like an average, like on average, students with WUE save about this amount of money, or they, on average, they pay about this amount of money, but it's gonna depend on the school. So you're gonna wanna go off of whatever the school's information is and based off of their tuition. So there's no real like set average that you're guaranteed that that's what you're gonna pay at any institution. What WUE is at Oregon State versus MSU versus at Wyoming is all going to be different because all of our in-state tuitions are different. So you're going to want to make sure you're checking with the school on going off of their amount. And are we almost out of time here?
Sorry, yes, I was having technical difficulties. Yes, so I am going to wrap things up here. Thank you so much to our panelists. Lots of great information about WUE today. Hope all the students learned a lot. If they didn't get to your question, they will be getting your questions and your contact information, so they would be happy to follow up with you. You have their information as well, so please don't hesitate to reach out directly to them. When you close this window, there will be a link to a very quick 4-question survey. So if you could take just a couple of seconds to fill that out for us, help us know what went well. If you have any other questions, any feedback for what types of information we can provide to help you with your college search, that would be awesome. Don't forget, this was just one of many sessions being hosted this week. So be sure to go back to that StriveScan website, sign up for those sessions. And then in about a week, you'll be able to find this session's recording as well as all the other session recordings that you may be interested in. So again, thank you to everyone for joining us and have a great evening.